Halkomelem par h13 is a language of various First Nations peoples in British Columbia, ranging from southeastern Vancouver Island from the west shore of Saanich Inlet northward beyond Gabriola Island and Nanaimo to Nanoose Bay and, including the Lower Mainland from the Fraser River Delta upriver to Harrison Lake and the lower boundary of the Fraser Canyon. In the classification of Salishan languages, Halkomelem is a member of the Central Salish branch. There are 4 other branches of the family: Tsamosan, Interior Salish, Coola, and Tillamook.Speakers of the Central and Tsamosan languages are often identified in ethnographic literature as Coast Salish. The word Halkomelem is an anglicization for the language, which has 3 distinct dialect groups: an island group, spoken by 6 separate but closely related First Nations on Vancouver Island and adjoining islands on the west side of the Strait of Georgia, the Snuneymuxw, Nanoose, Chemainus, Cowichan, Halol, Lake Cowichan, Iaxan, and Penlacket, a downriver group, spoken by the Musqueam, Sorvasan, Kwantlen, Tsleil-Waututh-Kayate, Quiquetlam, and Katzi First Nations, and an upriver group, the Upper Stow, Low, spoken from the Matsqui First Nation on upstream to Yale. The language differences are greatest between the island and upriver dialects, with the downriver dialect providing a central link between the other two. The diversity of the Halkomelem dialects is noted to be the result of complex social and economic forces and linguistic change, as many island people crossed the Georgia Strait to camp along the Fraser River for the summer runs of salmon. Arranged marriages between children in different language areas was also common, helping to establish a regional social network in the Strait of Georgia-Puget Sound Basin. Use and revitalization efforts. The Halkomelem language is near extinction. In 2000, it was estimated that the number of fluent Halkomelem speakers was less than 1 dozen. Most are middle-aged or older and few are monolingual, as there was a flood of English-speaking settlers in the region in the mid-19th century. Language programs at the Stow, Low Nation, Seabird Island First Nation, and Cowichan First Nation have been developed to save the language. A program aimed at adults at Musqueam is a collaboration between the band and the University of British Columbia First Nations and Endangered Languages Program. In September 2009, the University of California Press published his Dictionary of Upriver Halkomelem. A Halkomelem iPhone app was released in 2011. As of 2010, 278 fluent speakers had been reported. Phonology. Note: all examples are drawn from the h̒lkəઃmeɪləm dialect spoken by Musqueam, a band which speaks the downriver dialect of Halkomelem. Relevant differences in the phonology of the island and upriver dialects are noted at the foot of the phoneme charts. Vowels. h̒lkəઃmeɪləm has 5 vowel phonemes. Long and short vowels contrast. Vowel length is written in the native orthography as. 4 of these vowel phonemes are common, while u occurs mainly in loan words. All 5 vowel phonemes vary considerably phonetically. The phoneme I has 3 distinct allophones. It is realized as following unrounded uvulars. It is realized as with a central off glide preceding both unrounded and rounded uvulars. Elsewhere, it is realized as lower high. The E is realized as a low to mid-front vowel, usually between a high. The A is low and central to back, often close to. The U is high, back, and rounded, realized somewhere between lower high. When stressed, the schwa E appears in most environments as a mid-central, but it is fronted and raised before X, approaching, before Y. It is also fronted, approaching, before with it is lower and back, approaching, and before rounded velars it is mid-back, close to. Unstressed E can be as high as before X and Y, and before labialized V as it is realized as OR. This phoneme can also be assimilated to a stressed E, or a stressed A in an adjacent syllable, by vowel harmony. Consonants of the 43 consonants that have been recorded by Suttles in the Musqueam downriver dialect of Halkomelem, 5 are of recent and, or peripheral phonemic status. 5 glottalized resonants pose a problem in phonemic analysis, and 5 enclosed-in braces occur only in a few foreign and imitative words. The stops and affricates are grouped together for simplification purposes. The plain plosives are less aspirate before vowels than in English, but they are more aspirate finally. Although the glottalized plosives are adjectives, they are not usually strongly released. Suttles made several interesting notes on the Musqueam obstruents. The labiodental fricative F occurs in recent loans from English, and the derivatives such as in coffee, coffee, and in sif, chief. Quote, according to Suttles, the stops T and T are articulated at a point slightly forward of that of the usual English T and D, while the affricates C and C are somewhat more retracted than these English phonemes. The affricate has only been recorded in Kinjaj Englishman and Kinjajkin English. Quote, the glottalized lateral affricate is produced when the apex of the tongue at the onset is in the position for the lateral release rather than for a T, and there is less friction produced than with other affricates. The phonemes K and K occur in baby talk as substitutes for Q and Q. The uvular fricative X is produced with a great deal of friction and, or uvular vibration, and it contrasts strongly with the velar fricative X. There is variation in the extent to which Musqueam speakers glottalize resonants. Phonetically, there are glottalized resonants and resonants preceded or followed by glottal stops. However, Suttles found no instances of contrastive distribution among any of the three. He puts forth 2 explanations for these facts: that there are 2 sequences of phonemes, R and R, with overlapping allophones, or that there is a single phoneme R that is realized in 3 distinct ways. In preferring the latter explanation, Suttles holds that there may be 5 glottalized resonant phonemes in the dialect, although downriver speakers glottalize resonants very lightly, making them difficult to detect. In most upriver dialects, glottalized resonants do not exist, while in island dialects, they are more sharply articulated. As is the case with many other phonological features, downriver Halkomelem stands as a link between the other dialect areas, and it is possible that its speakers vary depending on island or upriver influence. Other differences between dialects include, island and downriver have both N and L, while upriver has merged these as L. Upriver lacks the post-vocalic glottal stops of the other 2 dialects, and vowel length usually appears in that environment for speakers of that dialect. Additionally, upriver dialects have greater pitch differences, and some words are differentiated by pitch alone. Stress and pitch, based on Suttles' recordings of several speakers of the downriver dialect. Stress in Halkomelem consists of an increase in intensity and an accompanying rise in pitch. The 3 levels of stress are primary, secondary, and weak. There is 1 vowel with primary stress in every full word, however, its occurrence is not completely predictable. In uninflected words with more than 1 vowel, the primary stress usually falls on the first vowel. There are exceptions to this general pattern, as shown by the preceding example. If the word contains both a full vowel and 1 or more schwas, the stress is placed on the full vowel. Again, there are exceptions to this pattern, such as in words with a final glottal stop that cannot be preceded by schwa. Although minimal pairs contrasting stress are rare, they do exist in the language. The primary stress of a verb root consisting of a resonant, a schwa, and an obstruent followed by the suffix t transitive can fall on either the root of the suffix, allowing for minimal pairs such as mk et salvage and mekit finish it all. The secondary stress appears most often in words that are composed of a root that has retained its stress in a stress suffix. It may be the case, however, that the secondary stress recorded by subtles in words like cf theta amx is actually a falling pitch. This seems to be characteristic of the last stress syllable of a phrase in the language. Additional analyses of the sentential intonation patterns are needed. Phonotactics or obstruents typically follow one another in sequences of up to 4, although a sequence of 5 is also possible. There are no specific restrictions on the types of obstruent sequences that can occur. Plosives appearing in sequences are re-articulated, and sequences of SS are common in the language. Resonants only appear adjacent to vowels. When these sounds occur in the middle of words, they are found in sequences of resonant obstruent, resonant resonant, and obstruent resonant. An initial resonant is always followed a vowel, and a final resonant must be preceded by one. The laryngeals are more restricted than members of the other natural classes in Halkomelem. The glottal stop occurs only adjacent to a vowel, and within words, it does not follow any obstruent except per second. It can never occur in final position following a schwa. Parawa occurs only before vowels following a resonant one of the fricatives at morpheme boundaries, but never following other obstruents. Interestingly, it can appear between an unstressed and a stressed vowel, but it cannot occur between a stressed and an unstressed vowel. Morpho Phonemics. Certain processes affect the realization of underlying sounds in Halkomelem. Alternations that occur fairly commonly are discussed in this section, rather than in the following section on morphology. In rapid speech, there is optional loss of some instances of schwa, glottal stop, glottalization of resonance, and parawa. An unstressed schwa following an initial nasal stop may be lost. If there is a vowel preceding the nasal is sometimes heard as part of that syllable, ni, with no preceding vowel sometimes appears as syllabic. A glottal stop after an unstressed final vowel may be lost, in which case the vowel will be reduced to a schwa. The glottalization of resonance following unstressed vowels is often inaudible. Parawa before a stressed vowel may be lost when preceded by a spirant. An unstressed schwa may take on the quality of an adjacent full vowel, or one that is separated from it by a glottal stop. When a root with the shape of ka takes the suffix a transitive, the resulting form is ca-ut. It appears that the resonant and schwa have switched positions, but the glottal stop protects the schwa from assimilating to the full vowel. Several roots appear alone, without having undergone affixation. When this type of root is followed by a suffix that begins with a stressed vowel, and parawa appears. A final parawa is never realized after a stressed vowel. A number of suffixes beginning with n have forms with initial l when they are added to a root of stem ending in l. In the progressive and resultative forms of few verbs with initial c or x followed by a, the c is reduplicated as k and the x as x. The vowel gradation often occurs between a full vowel schwa and 0, depending on the type of root of stem, type of suffix, and placement of stress. When some suffixes are joined with stems, a change in the quality of the stressed vowel from one full vowel to another in the stem, or in the suffix results. The vowel mutations are the product of the assimilation of one vowel to that of an adjacent syllable at an earlier stage in the language's history. Three kinds of these mutations exist. In the first two examples, the vowel mutation is similar to the umlauting effect of a suffix on stems in Germanic languages. Stem e changes to a. Stem a to e, which is composed of spiral, raven, and the suffix id theta e, clothing, blanket. Suffix e to a dot. Morphology. Like the majority of Salishan languages, Halkomelem is polysynthetic. A word in Halkomelem may consist of a root standing alone and unaltered, or of a root altered by one or more processes of internal modification and or accompanied by one or more affixes. Since all words can function as predicate heads, there is no basis for distinguishing verbs, nouns, and adjectives. There are other bases, however, for distinguishing these classes. Verbs have progressive forms and do not take possessive affixes, while nouns do not have progressive forms and take possessive affixes. Adjectives have neither progressive forms, nor do they take possessive affixes. Compounding is non-existent in the language, although some scholars believe to have found a few possible examples. The majority of verb roots have the shapes cec, cec, while noun roots typically have the shape cv. The most common shapes of adjective roots are cec and cac. There is a prefix that nominalizes verbs and adjectives, and there are several prefixes that make verbs out of nouns. Additionally, there are several ways to make adjective-like words from nouns. Processes of internal modification of the root include reduplication, shift in stress and vowel grade, and glottalization of resonance. Roots of different shapes often undergo different processes to produce forms that are grammatically identical. Verbs roots are identified as perfective as opposed to progressive aspect. Perfective sh-q, split der. Progressive seseq, be splitting, be tearing. Several verbs also have ergative aspect, which can occur in both forms. Perfective q-ik, bite it. Progressive q-ik, be biting it. A number also have an iterative dispositional aspect. For a few of these verb roots, this aspect can appear in both a progressive and in a perfective form. Shake useq, easy to split. The majority of verbs have a resultative form which is adjective-like and does not carry a progressive perfective distinction. Ssesiq, split, torn. Skekil, spilled, capsized. The plural can be optionally marked in all of these forms. The diminutive is also marked, optionally, in only the progressive and resultative aspects. Nouns. It is possible to internally modify noun roots in Halkomelem for the plural, the diminutive, and the diminutive plural. Compare salix, hand, salix, hands. Keklex, little hand, seseklex, little hands. A few nouns may have resultative forms. They do not have progressive forms, but they may be made into a verb with a verbalizing affix and then express this form. Adjectives. Similar to noun roots, adjective roots can be internally modified for plural, diminutive, and diminutive plural. They can only have progressive forms if made into verbs by means of a verbalizing affix. Peq, white. Pe acute, pq, white. Complex adjectives are formed from adjective roots and lexical suffixes. Ma-eq, large bird. Affixes. Halkomelem contains prefixes, suffixes, and infixes. All infixes of the language have been described in the preceding sections. Affixes are typically divisible into inflectional, derivational, and grammatical and lexical categories, depending on their involvement in paradigms and meaning. However, a number of Halkomelem affixes mix these categories. Subtles identifies the following classes of suffixes and prefixes. A sampling of these affixes follow. Non-personal affixes. Suffixes of the voice system. Transitive t and ex, transitive, intransitive m, intransitive e, acute s, activity, causative stex, causative, permissive s, let, as in let him go or let it be, applicative nes, go, ne, acute m, go, reflexive theta a, oneself, namit, oneself, reciprocal, tell each other. Subordinate passive, subordinate passive. Aspectual and modal affixes. Aspectual prefixes. We established well already. Modal suffixes. H̒lkəઃmeɪləm, want to, intend to, seem about to. Derivational affixes. Affixes with purely grammatical meaning. Nominalizing prefix. For second, nominalize. Verbalizing affixes. See, get, make, do, go to, l, partake of, tx, by, al, traveled by. Lexical prefixes. Me, come, ten, from. Lexical suffixes. Body parts. aq, head. Common artifacts. Wet, canoe. Natural phenomena. Etp, plant, tree. Personal affixes. Possessive affixes. The following table lists the possessive affixes which appear in attributive possessive structures in Halkomelem. Possession is marked either on the possessed noun of the word preceding it through these affixes. Together with the appearance of affixes, possession also requires a structural component, in that the possessor of the head is found to the right of the head. The possessor is always preceded by a determiner, although depending on the noun class, it can also appear with an oblique case marker. If the possessor is a common noun, it will be introduced by a determiner, but without an oblique case marker. If, however, the possessor is a proper noun, it must appear in the oblique case. Thus, it will be preceded by an oblique case marker, and the possessed noun will appear without a possessive affix. For proper nouns, the determiner and the oblique case marker are fused into a single particle. Marking common nouns with an oblique case marker results in an ungrammatical construction. Most verbs' roots are semantically patient-oriented, while few verbs are semantically agent-oriented. All are grammatically intransitive. These relations are different with the suffixes of the voice system. A verb that is made up of an inactive root and an intransitive suffix is grammatically intransitive but semantically active. An inactive or active root that takes on a transitive suffix is grammatically transitive and takes an object. The transitive suffix is the base for an object. A passive person suffix. Two of the most commonly used transitive suffixes distinguish actions performed with limited control or accidentally from those performed with full control or purposely. Aspectual prefixes, which precede predicate heads, have adverbial meaning and express temporal distinctions. Modal suffixes follow the suffixes of the voice system and indicate desire or intention and search or arrangement. Lexical suffixes can be related to verb roots as objects, locus, or instruments, to adjective roots as noun heads, and to noun roots as noun possessors of the noun heads of modifiers. The personal affixes distinguish first, second, and third person in singular and plural. There are neither dual forms nor inclusive, exclusive distinctions in this language. There is also a set of possessive affixes. This system will be covered in detail in the syntax section. Ordering of affixes. Derivational prefixes and suffixes form an inner layer around the word root, while inflectional affixes form an outer layer around the root. Among derivational affixes, those with lexical meaning stand closer to the root than those with purely grammatical meaning. Among inflectional affixes, those of the voice and person systems stand closer to the root than the aspectual prefixes and modal suffixes. Xq enectes, punches holes in the bottom of it.